I try to work through the words that we hear from our sports teams and instead look at their actions. Grandy and I were having a conversation earlier today about this with regard to Marco Luciano. You can keep telling me that he's an amazing prospect, but your actions suggest right now you're not that impressed. You wanted to give him the job on opening day. You didn't. Then the guy that you did give the job to got hurt. Did you call him up? You didn't. So your actions are suggesting you're not that into Marco Luciano right now. All right, let's do that with Kevin Durant. I think it's funny that the Suns general manager and new owner have both made public comments with regard to running it back and making everything all about Kevin Durant. And in a way, that action in and of itself should tell us a story, because the cadence of the Suns offseason has been intense. They get swept out of the playoffs, and then immediately there's the Shams report. Kevin Durant didn't like his role. You have him standing over there in the corner. What the hell's that all about? James Jones holds a press conference immediately, openly begging for Kevin Durant to not be mad. Boy, we think that the whole world revolves around Kevin Durant. And nobody's ever been able to maximize that potential ever in the history of his career. Not the 2 rings he won in Golden State, and not the MVP that he won in Oklahoma City. Those 2 teams don't know what they're doing, but we do, and we're about to figure this thing out. ... Frank Vogel, you're fired. ... Championship coach Budenholzer, you're hired. All of the actions are telling you what? That Kevin Durant is livid. Livid. And you are acting quickly to try to change his mind. And with your finances being the way they are, my contention, this is not a fixable situation. So what does that mean? What does that mean with regard to the availability of Kevin Durant? Let's dive into this a little bit. Stephen A. Smith, with regard to the state of Kevin Durant's mind.
Here's where Mike Wilbon didn't go into the details that all of us covering the NBA are fully aware of. Kevin Durant in Phoenix is a problem. It is a problem. We don't see it because the stats are there. Him and Booker averaged 27 points per game and what have you. But they say Kevin Durant is never happy. They say that he went more than a month without even talking to the head coach. They say that he doesn't look happy there. And all he wants to do is play when the game starts and tip-off time arrives. But when it comes to ingratiating yourself with your teammates and getting along with everybody and stuff like that, he just lives in his own world. He's not hated. He's not despised. He's not doing anything negative. He's not being somebody that's two-faced and behind people back doing stuff. No, that's not who Kevin Durant is, but keeping to himself. Why does that matter? It's similar to what he was doing in Golden State before he ultimately departed, which is what was driving Draymond Green crazy, which is why they ultimately got into it on the court in that Clippers game and what have you. Because you hear stuff, you hear about the level of unhappiness, et cetera, and you get tired of it because when you don't want to talk and when you don't want to answer questions, and you don't want to lead in a very visible way, well, that forces other people to have to step up and take on a level of culpability that they don't want to stomach. And so because of all of that stuff, that's the untold stuff that's going on in Phoenix. There's more than that. Make no mistake, it's not all on Kevin Durant, but that's a big, big part of it.
Okay, first off, you're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco and Odyssey Sports Station. Always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Upgrade your savings dividend. Open a First NorCal first-class money market today. How did all that grab you?
It grabbed me like what you were laying out, where Kevin Durant is clearly not happy with the situation. The situation is broken in more ways than just the head coach and Kevin Durant's role. You look at the financials of the Phoenix Suns, and you realize they've got to make some sort of a move unless they want to run it back and pay a gigantic tax bill, which I don't think that they want to do. I think they hired Bud to have a veteran coach come in and try to calm the seas a little bit. But Kevin Durant is a guy who he's not afraid to bounce around. He's been in, 4 different situations already, 5 if you count Seattle. And if he's in a spot where he doesn't think it's going to work, he's going to find his way out of there.
You know what's interesting and a little bit of a wet blanket in hearing the conversation is when Stephen A. goes, "This is very similar to what happened in Golden State."
Right.
So you're like, okay, does that mean it would be that way again? Have we reached, and I know, before I even ask this, I know some of you are going to be like, duh. Have we reached a spot where you're just like, Kevin Durant's never going to be happy? It doesn't matter where he goes. He's never going to be happy.
Well, think about where he's been and how he's been. He was in Seattle. They moved to OKC. They're a really, really good team. They're an eyelash away from a championship, and it falls apart. And eventually, Russ leaves, he leaves, James leaves, they all leave. And he goes to the place where the team that beat him, and he wins 2 championships, and they go for a third. And in the beginning of that third season here, you already could see the discontent, and you could see that, what are we not playing with Joy anymore? Whatever happened to Joy? So even though you won back-to-back titles and you were a back-to-back finals MVP, he still wasn't happy. So you go to Brooklyn, and you try to make it happen there, and you assemble another cast of stars gone by, and it doesn't work there. And so then you force your way out again, and now you go to Phoenix, and you again join other great players, and it doesn't work there, and you're not happy. So I believe that that's probably the way this is going to go. What would make him happy? You've been on a super team and won.
Yep.
Didn't make you happy. You got your own thing in Brooklyn. Didn't make you happy. You went to Phoenix for a fresh start. Didn't make you happy.
Don't forget Oklahoma City.
That's what I'm saying. Your first place.
Yeah, you won an MVP.
Right. You went to the finals.
You went to the finals.
And you weren't happy.
And I blamed that on Russell Westbrook largely. My uneducated thought in looking at it, because I think Kevin Durant, and this maybe is at the core of some of his issues, most of the places he goes, save the Warriors. Forget that one. Put that over here for a sec. The other places, I think Kevin gets worn out because he thinks that he's got a better idea of how to win than the people around him. I think he is a much higher IQ basketball player than Russell Westbrook. And I think that drove those two apart. Then he came to Golden State, where IQ basketball was the deal.
Right.
Nobody's playing higher IQ basketball than the Warriors 6-7 years ago. Nobody. Maybe in the history of ever, but certainly in the last 20 years. Nobody's doing that. And you got Draymond and Steph and the way they're playing ball. Clay.
Even Livingston and David West.
No doubt. And so it works, but it's also maybe in the end just a little too much emotionally. Draymond, the love for Steph, right? Okay, so I'm going to look for maybe to be able to do this on my own terms.
Right.
And he still hasn't been able to find the group around him to do that. Kyrie Irving, probably the best matching teammate, yet it all happens at a time where the pandemic drives a complete wedge between him and the organization, and it just never gets off the ground. Now you go to Phoenix, where everyone is totally miscast. You have a coach who seemingly just gets immediately fired everywhere he goes. And here we are. So, when you lay it all out that way, I do feel like his discontent with the Warriors came from a different place than his discontent with other teams. Therefore, is there an openness to a reboot? And the best I can say is maybe. Maybe.
To me, it depends on one thing and one thing only. Maybe two things if you throw Steve Kerr in the mix. But for me, it depends on how he really feels about Draymond Green and playing with Draymond Green. Because Draymond Green is a demanding teammate. Draymond Green is probably an exhausting teammate. And, Kevin Durant lived through it. And you go back to a place where you won 2 championships and you had your biggest injury of your life as well. You put it all out there. You were hurt, and you put your Achilles on the line for this team, knowing that there was a pretty good chance that thing was going to blow, and then it did. And then you end up leaving, and you missed a whole year because of the Achilles. I don't know if the emotional baggage of going back there would be too heavy.
I don't know. That's also a long time ago, and everything is different now.
Yeah.
It's all different now. With every individual you just mentioned, all of them are in a different space. So would it work again? And before you go, Mark, the Suns have already said they're not trading Kevin Durant. I think if you feel that way, you're making the mistake of thinking that they're in control. They're not in total control. One more from Stephen A.
Which is why you've got to disband this group. They're not a big three. They're big three in money. They're a big three in name, but they ain't a big three in level of production. They were the worst fourth quarter team in the NBA last year. They got outscored by 11.6 points for 100 possessions. Well, guess what? That schematically, in terms of Frank Vogel, that's number one offensively, because defensively the man knows what he's doing. But evidently, they were one of the poorer defensive teams, particularly in the fourth quarter. They just didn't get it done. And in the end, when you get swept in the first round and you've got those kind of problems, I'm talking to America. I'm not speculating. I'm not guessing. I'm talking to you as somebody that covers this league. Most of us in the league who cover the NBA know this stuff has been going on in Phoenix, but it's far more problematic than we gave noise to it about as the season progressed. Once the season ended, you heard more and more and more about what happened. That's why they got a championship coach up in there with a 5-year deal, giving them more than $10 million a year, because you're making that investment because you know more changes have to come, and you have to have that person in that position that could facilitate.
I mean, if you just, and I suggest this for everyone, because very few people listening to our show right now are Phoenix Suns fans. Go take 20 minutes and dive in on the internet to the Suns situation. When you're done, I defy you to come out of there and think that they can run it back. They can't. They literally can't. It would be the stupidest thing ever to wait another year, go fire the same players out there who don't fit with one another. You won't win. Rocky, you can't win.
Right.
You cannot win, and all you're doing is letting everybody get 1 year older, 1 year more frustrated, another year of insane money out the door, and trade leverage could go flying down with any one or all of these players in that process. You're not trading Book. That's your guy.
Right.
You're not trading Beal. Nobody wants the contract.
He has a no trade clause.
You have one way out, and it's trading Kevin Durant.
But it's the least desirable way out. I mean, trading.
But it's the only way out.
Right. Unless you do want to just, double this thing down and wait until the deadline and make a move. But you're right about the leverage and the tradability of these guys. Kevin Durant's no spring chicken. He's going to be 36, so...
My point exactly.
Right.
You want to get something for him? You still can. Stephen A's point about the numbers is so accurate. Everyone goes, hey, Durant and Booker, 27 a night each? Fool's gold. It's a cloud. Fly right through it.
Yes, but Durant, if wherever he goes, he can get you 27 a night on a good team.
Right, but it's got to affect winning.
Right.
It's got to affect winning.
And he has.
Yes.
He's affected winning before. It just depends on what team he goes to.
And they're so good that they won more games than they lost this year because, in the NBA, largely you're playing teams night in and night out that you can handle when you have that kind of talent. But in no way, shape, or form is that going to win a ring. And if you are Kevin like this, to me, now you're in a spot where Kevin's age is to the Warriors' advantage because Kevin's time is ticking. And if you want something else and you want to take a shot at something else, you're not waiting another year. You don't have it. You can't wait. Yeah.
And Kevin's making $106 million over the next 2 years. So as far as Kevin making that big money, this is probably it. He needs to go somewhere in the next year and make a real push for winning